Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to thank you for joining us today for our webinar, 5 Ways to Transform How Your Library Works with Your Community. I'm Liz Bowie, Content Manager at Demco, and I'll be moderating today's session. Before we get started, I just wanted to go through some housekeeping details, and then I'll introduce our speaker and she can get started on today's presentation. On your screens, you should see a question box on the right-hand side. If you have a question or need technical help, please use this box to communicate with us. If we don't get to your question during the session, we'll be posting questions and answers along with the recorded webcast, presentation slides, and resources after the event. You will receive an email in about a week letting you know when everything is available. You'll also notice both our presenters' contact information as well as mine. Please feel free to contact us directly with any questions that haven't been answered in the follow-up resources. We're also using Twitter today with the hashtag DemcoIdeas. You should be able to see this hashtag on the side of the screen in the chat box. We're also monitoring that feed as well for questions and comments. I believe that's all the housekeeping, so let's get started with the program. As I mentioned, I'm Liz Bowie and I'm moderating today's session, and I'm very excited to introduce you to our speaker today, Erica Freudenberger. Erica is the Outreach and Engagement Consultant at the Southern Adirondack Library System in New York, where she spends her time developing collaborative partnerships that help libraries empower the communities they serve. She formerly led the Red Hook Public Library, which garnered a 5-star library rating from 2013 to 16, and was a finalist for the Best Small Library Award given by Library Journal and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. In 2015, Red Hook Public Library was a pilot library for re-envisioning public libraries with the Aspen Institute. And in 2014, it was one of the 10 libraries nationwide chosen to be part of the American Library Association's Libraries Transforming Communities initiative. For her work, Erica was named a mover and shaker by Library Journal in 2016. We're so excited to have Erica with us today to talk about how to focus on community engagement, build partnerships, and transform your library services. So it looks like we're ready to get started with the program. Erica, you can take it away whenever you're ready.
Thanks so much, Liz, and thanks to everybody for being here today. And I just want to start by saying I love public libraries, quite possibly too much, but that's another issue. So why do I love them so much? Because I believe that in a complex and disruptive environment, public libraries can strengthen the social fabric in our digital age, create connections, collaborations, and help communities build our world, or at least our corner of it, as we want it to be. We can empower the communities we serve by helping them identify and multiply resources through strategic collaborations, by developing inclusive plans that encourage citizens to become active agents in our democracy, and by adapting local sustainable strategies, allowing us to innovate and thrive, and so that our communities will as well. But if I get really practical, it comes down to getting the funding we need. If we want to be able to have sustainable and resilient libraries that have all the resources that they need to operate, community engagement is the work we need to do. Because our future is not transactional, but relational. And yes, we share material and information, and yes, that's awesome, but those are just the tools we use toward our larger purpose, which is transforming society. The American Library Association is in its 3rd year of the Libraries Transform campaign, and if we're saying nationally that libraries transform lives, by gum, we've got to do it, which means we need to shift our focus from collections to connections. As a bonus, it's also the most meaningful work we can do and reconnects us to what's really important about being public librarians, working with people and helping them make the changes they want to see in their lives and in the world. I'll return to this idea later, because first I'm going to talk a little bit about the disruptive landscape we currently inhabit. So as librarians, we've been told by the news, our neighbors, and sometimes even loved ones that we have no future. I don't know if anybody has ever had somebody come in and say, oh, I didn't know anybody still used the library. Yes, they do. And we all know the reasons why. Everything's available online, and libraries are just buildings with dusty books. When we think of the future, we think of technology. This is my favorite technology. It's a thing of beauty, which is simple and easy to use, and is the perfect tool. A couple of years ago, ebooks were a new big thing, and It caused quite a disruption for many libraries, and we were told that we needed to reallocate our funds and invest very heavily in ebooks. Some libraries went as far to eliminate their print collections and go solely digital, which was an interesting choice. Now the future is digital and streaming, so we should be signing up with Hoopla, Freegal, Canopy, all those other services so patrons can get the content they want directly. And these are all really interesting ideas and great ideas, but none are game changers. Ebooks and streaming services are exciting, especially for small libraries like the one I ran that had really limited physical space, but it's still about delivering content, albeit in a new format. This is not the future of libraries, it's a continuation of what we already do. If we're serious about transformation, we need to rethink not only what we do, but how we do it and how we position ourselves in the communities we serve. And I believe the key to that type of deep, abiding transformation is community engagement. Excuse me. And I know that it can be really hard to hear that our future isn't something that requires a power cord, right? It's not super sexy to find out that what I'm proposing is an old idea, taken from English common law back in 1891. Put simply, it's a way for people to come together, determine and implement a collective vision which benefits a community. But it is our reality. We're in the midst of a historic shift from a post-industrial to a sharing economy. This economic model shifts the focus from ownership to access. This is the world of the millennials. Think zip cars, Airbnb, Lyft, etc. It's the new reality. I don't need a drill, I need a hole in the wall. It's not about stuff, and excuse me, as an aspiring hoarder, I know exactly how difficult that can be to let go of. In this economy, sharing and ideas are valued over possessions and things, which is awesome for us. We are experts in sharing resources and ideas, which means we are ideally positioned to rock this economy. Our future isn't dim, it's never been brighter. So I'm now going to take you on a Mr. Toad's Wild Ride version of the journey I've been on for the past 7 years. Today I'm going to talk mainly about my 6.5 years as the director of Red Hook Public Library, which is located in the Hudson Valley of New York. I'm now working as the outreach and engagement consultant for Southern Adirondack Library System, which, as the name implies, is in the Southern Adirondacks of New York. As part of my job, I work with 34 member libraries in 4 counties, and these include small rural libraries and some suburban libraries and some municipal libraries and libraries with substantial budgets and professional staffs of more than 30 FTEs. And the work that I'm going to do is scalable to all of them. So in the top of this picture, the Racket Lake Library right there, that is our smallest library, and that serves a population of 153 people. And down to the left is the Saratoga Springs Public Library, which serves 50,000. So it's a nice range of communities that we serve. The Red Hook Public Library was is chartered to serve the village of Red Hook, which has a population of 1,961. But in practice, we actually served the entire town and the neighboring town of Milan, which altogether is about 10 or 11,000 people. Bard College is the main employer. The primary industry is agriculture, which in this case means small family-owned farms and orchards. When I began in August 2010, I was the first full-time employee the library had ever had. I had a budget of $165,000 a year and a $600,000 building project being financed out of that budget. Once the building project was complete, $36,000 a year would be coming out of my operating budget in order to cover the cost of construction, which meant that as soon as the project ended, we would have to reduce our hours in order to pay our bills. The building project included creating a children's library on the garden level, which meant that we would also need additional staffing. In addition to those challenges, the library had a reputation that it had earned over about a decade of being profoundly unfriendly and inhospitable. So it was best to avoid altogether, especially if you had kids under the age of 18. So to recap, I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't have enough staff. I didn't have enough money. And most people avoided the library like the plague. And as Ed Catmull reminds us in Creativity Inc., this was a tremendous gift. I had limitations that forced me to think differently and more creatively about how to accomplish my goals. In the beginning, I tried traditional ways to spread or push our message out to the public. We did outreach, telling people all about our fabulous services. We sent out hundreds of press releases because I am a media whore, I'm a former journalist, and that was a very comfortable role for me to play. And I began very aggressively marketing the library. But why would anyone take our word for how wonderful we were when their experience had been otherwise? So pushing information out into the community wasn't working, so I figured I'd try and pull information from it. We held focus groups and sent out surveys to find out what people wanted from the library. Has anybody done that? We got results and learned that people wanted more of everything. They wanted more books, more DVDs, more services, and unfortunately, as I just explained with my budget, we were not in the position to provide it. So I had to spend time asking people for input about what we should do and then had to say, yeah, thanks. We can't do that. It was not a good look. I had learned from watching our friends group organize and host a successful big read that the library was part of an integral part, even, of a larger socio-ecosystem, the village and town it served. This sounds like a really simple idea, but it's one that's easy to forget. Libraries don't exist in vacuums. The only way we would survive and eventually thrive was to demonstrate our value by being part of something much larger than ourselves. If the village and town didn't flourish, neither would we. We had to stop worrying about communicating our value and focus on being valuable. So I took my mother's advice and I got my nose out of my book and I went outside to play. I started at a Chamber of Commerce meeting, and when I was there, somebody stood up and talked about Red Hook Together, a meeting of Bard College, Red Hook Central School District, the Village and Town, Chamber of Commerce, local businesses, and a whole bunch of other stakeholders. And as soon as I heard about it, I knew I had to go. And I didn't wait to be invited. And I want to say one thing about that. I think too often we wait for an invitation or assume that we're being deliberately excluded when really people don't know who we are or just didn't think we would be interested. So if you have an opportunity, just show up. That's what I did. When I got there, about 50 people were there. Everyone in the room introduced themselves and told a bit about their organizations. Fairly quickly, a theme emerged. Everyone talked about how the community needed a space where anyone could go and be welcome. This place would have a wide range of activities and programs where people met to discuss important civic matters. People wanted a central place in the community that was welcoming and provided resources for everyone. And this is such a great idea. And when it was my turn, I said, we have that. We have a public library in the center of town. And again, nobody believed me. And they had no reason to believe me because that hadn't been the experience with their library. So my challenge was to raise the profile of our library in a couple of months before we went out for a budget referendum. We were asking for a 55% budget increase in the first year of a 2% tax cap. That's in New York State, that was a statewide tax cap put in place by our legislature, which meant that the press was having a field day with our request. So we were getting a lot of coverage because we were doing this absurd ask at a time when everybody else was constricting their budgets. I had a vision of what our library could be and knew we didn't have the resources to do it on our own. So we started collaborating with everyone from Bard College, the Chamber of Commerce, Rotary, Historic Red Hook Central School District, and anyone else we could find. I describe myself as a promiscuous collaborator for a reason. I would get so excited and was so into working with people that people started crossing to the other side of the street when they saw me. We began by approaching our partners strategically, depending on what we needed. When I wanted to hold a program on robotics, but we didn't have the expertise to do so, we got in touch with Bard College's computer department. When we needed help providing one-on-one tech support for our patrons, we asked the high school to help identify teams to provide volunteer tech support. Everyone was eager and willing to help, and it was a beautiful thing. We were getting the community to help make our dream a reality. And as Liz mentioned earlier, in 2014, we were one of 10 libraries chosen to take part in ALA's Libraries Transforming Communities initiative. And at the first meeting, we felt really smug. We were already collaborating with everyone in town, and our team included our deputy mayor, the deputy director of Bard College's Center for Civic Engagement, and a retired regional head of parks in our region. We thought we were winning, and we were completely wrong. Because collaboration and partnership are not community engagement. Those are the starting points, and having meetings with and working across institutional boundaries is really important. But until we make time to have conversations with our communities about their aspirations and then empower them to make the changes they want to see, we're only scratching the surface. Previously, when we were collaborating with community groups, we were asking for what the library needed and giving them then what we thought they needed or what we thought they should want. Thinking about it now, I see how incredibly arrogant it was to assume that we knew what the community wanted or needed, but I didn't know until we did this initiative with ALA that it was a problem that we weren't asking the community what vision it had for itself. We were talking a lot, but completely having the wrong conversation. And so I really would love other public libraries to shift their conversations and our thinking from expert knowledge, which is what we know about libraries, how they're run, what we're capable of, and all that other fabulous stuff, to public knowledge, which is the stuff that everyone else is talking about and what matters to them in their community. And guess which one of those things people really care about, right? We can ignore public knowledge at our own peril. And we do so, I mean, I don't know if anybody else has ever had this experience, but has anyone ever given a program and had no one come? I know I had. And rather than thinking about, oh, why am I not connecting with the community? It's like, it was a problem with our marketing. It was or people just don't want to come out, or people don't support the library. We weren't looking at the fact that we were doing what we thought people should want and not asking them what they actually wanted. So I feel like we spend a lot of time trying to remain relevant, and instead of that, if we're part of a different conversation about what we as a community value, then we can figure out how to create what everybody wants to see happen, and that's a good place to be. So how did we do this? At Red Hook Public Library, we spent 8 months collecting public knowledge. We talked to hundreds of people going door to door at local festivals and grocery stores, wherever people were willing to talk for a couple of minutes. It takes about 10 minutes. This allowed us to get a better sense of what people really think about and talk to their neighbors about. When we talk to people, we ask them this series of 4 questions, taken from the Harwood Institute for Public Innovation Toolbox, located at ala.org/LTC. And there are tons of free resources for libraries to use, and I would really recommend that you go and check them out because they're great. And I don't know if anyone's used the Harwood tools, but if you look at these questions, I know that the first time that I asked our first practice exercise was with my school superintendent. And when he was asked these questions, at the end he said, "But you didn't ask me anything about the library." And I said, "Yes, exactly. Because it's not about us, it's about the community." Now, I do want to let you know one thing about the tools at ala.org/LTC. They're designed to be used with really specific audiences. The Ask exercise, which we just talked about, is for one-on-one conversations and should take no more than like 10 minutes to do. Because we were going to people's homes and being invited in, of course it took much longer because people were very comfortable and enjoyed having extended conversations. The aspirations exercise is to be used with groups of people who currently work together, who will continue to work together. So groups like Rotary or the Chamber of Commerce or the Town Board. And that's a great place also to start with your own boards. If you decide to do this work, take some time to do the aspirations exercise with your own board and your own staff so that they understand what's going on and aren't taken by surprise later. And that was the first thing that I did with my board, which was very good because you don't want to surprise them. And it also gives you a chance to recruit people from that. And finally, community conversations are much more in-depth discussions that are held with the public outside of the library building. So all of these things should not be happening in your library. And they take about 1.5 to 2 hours. So it's a little bit of a heavier lift. We really use the ask exercise as our gateway drug. If people were willing to talk to us, and for the most part, people got really excited about sharing their thinking, we would then invite them to be a part of a community conversation. Um, I know that some libraries have, kind of posted these to their websites or tried to have them completed as a survey, and I would urge you to not do that. You're not going to get good information, and it's not how you do this work. These are really powerful tools, but they require the personal touch. It's a very high touch kind of exercise, and it requires that you listen and that you have to, it's not just that somebody gives you a response. Sometimes you have to dig deeper, and there really aren't any shortcuts. So I'm sure that some of you are thinking, I can barely get done what I need to, never mind chase people down to ask them their aspirations. And oops, I hear you. This work is not easy, and it definitely requires building capacity. At the time we got the grant, we had to look beyond our walls to fulfill our initial commitment. When we went to the first training, we realized that we had a ton of work ahead of us, which we would not be able to do on our own. So we asked for help. We had volunteers from the community, and Bard College students offered to partner with our team and go door to door. The more conversations we had, the more people wanted to get involved, which was fantastic, but it also meant relinquishing control, which for me can sometimes be very, very difficult. But in order to help our community move forward, we had to be able to build relationships and empower people to be part of a larger conversation. Our role was to facilitate and convene. When we didn't have enough people power, we recruited. We did use our expert knowledge, how to collect, organize, and distribute information to identify the common themes that mattered to people, and then to share that information out widely with the community. We reported back to all the groups that we involved and let the mayor and town supervisor know that we heard, or what we heard, and wrote a press release keeping the public in the loop. Identifying and naming the issues allowed different groups and individuals to come forward and then work on solutions. It wasn't our job as a library to fix things. It was to alert people to what issues were out there and to bring people together to find solutions. So what did we hear? In Red Hook, the narrative had been that the town was divided. We had the old guard, we had new people up from the city, and Bard College students. And historically, there's been a lot of tension between the groups. Yet, as we talked to people, common themes began to emerge. Because guess what? Everyone wants the same things, right? We heard that people are really happy to live in Red Hook, but there's room for improvement. They wanted to live in a safe community that embraces diversity, has a walkable, vibrant village with thriving businesses, hosts ample social gatherings so neighbors can continue to know each other and keep the small town relationships they value, and that provides more leadership and volunteer opportunities for teens and 20-somethings. So these were all very interesting for a number of reasons, but the thing that struck me the most was when people were talking about safety, because Red Hook is a small town, nobody locks their doors, and I couldn't understand why they were worried. And this is why you can't just ask something in a survey. We had to be able to draw people out, like, well, what do you mean by safety? And it turned out the problem was the traffic light. We have one traffic light in Red Hook, and it is in the center of the village, and about 20 years ago, the timing loop on it broke. And the mayor at the time had a falling out with the guy at the Department of Transportation. And 20 years later, the mayor has changed several times, but the dude at the DOT is still mad about whatever happened 2 decades ago. So due to this broken timing loop, traffic backs up and people have incredibly long delays. This is an intersection where two major county routes come together, so we've got like semis and other trucks passing through regularly. In order to avoid the traffic light, people were cutting through the side streets, which do not have sidewalks. So as people were speeding through these little side streets, kids and seniors were being put at risk, and a couple were hit by cars. So when people in Red Hook were talking about safety, what they meant was that the traffic light needed to be fixed. We let the mayor know, and he called the guy at the DOT, who pr predictably did nothing. After a couple of weeks, we posted the DOT contact information on Facebook because there actually was this is how hated the light was. Somebody had actually started a Facebook group called "We Hate the Red Hook the Red Hook light." So we posted there that, hey, this is the guy at the DOT to call. He's the one that can authorize the changes. If you really are serious about wanting to get it fixed, let him know. And that is when the magic started to happen. The same man who wouldn't fix the light when the mayor asked began getting calls from concerned citizens. And as those 1 or 2 calls turned into a dozen calls, a crew was dispatched to Red Hook to fix the timing loop. And just like that, after 20 years, the stoplight was fixed. I share this story to demonstrate not that the library got this done, but that we provided the necessary information to the community so that they could make the change they wanted and be the hero of their own story. It changed the way people began to think about things. They were no longer waiting for someone else to solve problems. We can take action to create the community we want to see, and that's powerful stuff. It made me think about what the purpose is of public libraries. We say public libraries are the cornerstone of democracy, but what does that mean? For me, it means that we're not here to create the best possible consumers we can. We're here to empower and educate, and to create engaged citizens ready to take action on matters that mean the most to them. It's important and energizing work, and we're in a unique position to do it. So let's use our powers for good and make that happen. So Red Hook Public Library is located in the northwest corner of the county, and services for Dutchess County are all based in Poughkeepsie, which is 45 minutes away by car. So it's inconvenient if you have a car, and if you don't, it's a major obstacle. People who have 1 car per family or no car are often unable to reach needed services. When people told us they were feeling isolated due to limited transportation, we decided to stop waiting for people to find us and instead took our programs to people wherever they were. Rather than waiting for teens to come to the library, we held after-school programs at the high school, where, conveniently, they had a 3D printer. We partnered with nonprofits to provide services to our community. We did the legwork so that our neighbors didn't have to. And we were happy to get out and about in the community for several reasons. First, obviously, it got us to where people are, which is awesome. Second, it solved one of our major problems, which was space. The library is housed in a mid-19th century octagonal building, which is super cool, but it only has 4,700 square feet divided over 3 floors. Our programs drew a lot of people, and we did not have room for them in the library. We had to get over what Nancy Chronic calls the edifice complex and realize that the library isn't a building, it's people. Once we embraced that, we didn't have 4,700 square feet, but 40 square miles of potential library space, which meant nothing was off the table. Stuff could happen everywhere, and we can play an active role in creative placemaking. We can hit the streets and still be at the library, far from our building, which led us to ask different questions, like what happens to the kids who can't get to the library to take part in our summer reading programs? Do they fall victim to summer slide? Are we really providing equitable services to our community? So for the past 3 summers, we partnered with our school district and Bard College on a mobile pop-up library that brought books and programs throughout the school district, which spans 2 counties. Bard College provided the van and the driver. The school librarians brought books, and we led programs. Each Friday, we began at the rec park, then traveled north to the Maple Lane community, which is a trailer park tucked away on a back road, visiting a community that doesn't have much of a culture of using the library. And because folk there are wary about getting a library card, or they had one once and they've racked up a bunch of fines and Now they don't want to use it. We give books away because we want to have books in every home. So it was just easier to do that. And working with the school librarians meant that they knew where all their students were, and they were there to help go knock on doors and say, hi, we're here from the library. And people saw a familiar face, which was great. We finished our loop up at Holy Cow, which is the most popular place in town, an ice cream shop. We were connecting with our community wherever they were, and they no longer had to worry about trying to find us or come to us to do stuff. We would find them. In the heart of our village, there's a municipal parking lot where each Saturday a farmer's market used to take place. Despite its prime location, it was really struggling and did not get a lot of foot traffic. So the mayor called and asked if we could help out. And we said yes, because we say yes to everything. And we launched our Hispanic Heritage Month at the Farmers Market. We partnered with La Voz, which is the Spanish language newspaper for the Hudson Valley. We had Oaxacan dancers, La Clinica mobile medical van, and storytelling, mural painting, a whole bunch of other stuff. And more than 100 people turned out, giving the farmers the best day of their season. We had a highly visible event in the middle of the village. We helped local farmers, and we drove foot traffic through the village. And this was an example of something our deputy mayor was really passionate about, which was creative placemaking, using public spaces to showcase cultural events and let the arts happen. So when we had talked to people, one of the things that we had heard was that people wanted a more diverse community, which was fascinating to me because the village of Red Hook is 87% white. And it's really easy, as Chimamanda Adichie Ngozi tells us, to have one group's story be the only one told or celebrated. But having a single story is really dangerous. So each winter in Red Hook, we have a holiday in the village, which is non-denominational celebration, but involves lighting an enormous tree and an oversized menorah. And that is our winter holiday narrative. As I've mentioned before, we worked with Bard College on a number of things, and Bard has a really robust international student program, and I've had been very lucky and gotten particularly close with a group of Nepali and Indian students. And one of our library team is from Gujarat, so I figured we had enough expertise to put together a Diwali celebration. And so we decided that we would do that. And we brought together volunteers from the local Indian community, Bard students, and another organization called Arts Mid-Hudson. In the end, more than 170 people of all ages came out to celebrate, including guys wearing camouflage and their hunting gear and jeans, and people dressed up, and women in beautiful saris. One of the volunteers brought her mother, who had just arrived from India a couple of days before. And so it's November in the Hudson Valley, which means it's chilly. And so this poor woman was like wrapped up in this enormous down coat, kind of sitting with her back against the wall, not looking super happy. At the beginning of the event, she was just kind of really just trying to just make it through, you could tell. But as the evening went on, the coat came off, she started getting more involved, and by the end of the evening she was smiling, laughing, standing over the mancala board, challenging all comers, and telling her daughter she'd send the family mancala board from India so that they continued to play. So why does this matter? Our story of how we celebrate winter in our community has changed. It's no longer just about having giant trees and menorahs. We also now have Diwali, and that's a really great thing. And we had a wonderful event, but more importantly, we strengthened our social fabric. One of the women who had volunteered to make Diwali happen came up to me at the end of the event. She told me that she and her husband have lived in Red Hook for 40 years, but this was the first time she felt like she was a part of the community. And that to me just spoke volumes. It was this kind of amazing moment of clarity and letting me know that we were going in the right direction. That feeling was reaffirmed when last year for our second annual Diwali, one of our volunteers came up and gave me a check for $500. This was in a year that our budget for adult programming was $9.59. So that they wanted to ensure that Diwali would continue every year going forward, and they've pledged it as an annual contribution to keep the celebration going and are helping us to build capacity in community. And the woman that talked to me afterward about how much it meant, how she felt that she was now a part of the community, is now one of the main organizers of our annual Diwali celebration. And it's now the Diwali celebration isn't a library celebration, it's a community celebration, and the community has taken ownership of it. And it's wonderful. And we're a big part of it, and we convene it, but it's everybody who comes and gets involved. So Red Hook doesn't have the appeal and foot traffic of Rhinebeck, Hudson, or Kingston, which are all the cities that kind of, or the larger towns that surround us. And the narrative in Red Hook was that no one wants to come to Red Hook. And we disagreed. We said, libraries are economic engines, and we're going to prove it. Yes, it may have been a bit hasty to say that. But what we did is we partnered with a local bookstore, the Red Hook Community Arts Network, and Bard College to hold the Read Local Red Hook Literary Festival. And it was fantastic. It drew hundreds of people, and businesses reported that they had their best day ever. It created a template of how we wanted to be in the village in both big and small ways. We hosted movies at a local cafe and story times at a local candy shop. We saw the attendance at our programs improve, and we watched foot traffic being driven to local businesses. So community engagement shifts the focus to joint decision-making and empowerment. So why does this matter? As I've said before, the purpose of libraries is not to create the best possible consumers we can. It's to empower citizens to be actively involved in a democratic society. And I'll be honest, it takes a lot of time and chances are a significant organizational shift. It's really hard to let go of the library being the center of the universe. And it's even harder to let go of the stuff we love to do, like lead programs. But we made the decision, encouraged in no small part by financial necessity, to rethink how we did programs. As I said, like our adult program budget was $9.59. So instead of leading programs or hiring presenters, we decided to embrace the radical idea of making our library more democratic and offering programs by the people for the people. We recruited friends and neighbors to share their passions and expertise. And you know what? We had a full calendar of events and we're bursting at the seams. And this slide just showcases like a handful of the different programs that were led by our community. So I'm not going to lie, it's a lot of work and it can be terrifying, exhilarating, and sometimes a hot mess. And that's okay. Because we've got to stop guessing and most importantly, stop asking people what they want from the library because they just don't know. And I understand that this is hard. It's easier and more comfortable to continue to guess. Plus, you can do that from the comfort of your own office. But remember, what people want is not product-based, but relationship-based. We can't buy ourselves out of this. We have to do the much more difficult, high-touch, and time-intensive work of relationship building. There's no shortcut to community engagement. So last fall, when the town of Red Hook and its 2 villages wrote a new business plan, or not a business plan, I'm sorry, it was a new planning law to limit drive-through and formula businesses, which are like the big box stores, they cited the work the library had done in identifying community priorities as the basis of their decision. So the library was actually quoted in the law, which was kind of amazing. It blew me away to think that the work that we had done would influence our town for years to come and shape the very character of it and what it looked like. And the mayor in Red Hook called what had been happening the Red Hook Renaissance, which may have been grandiose, but he said the library had been a big part of it, and that made me really proud. But in the end, what we did wasn't anything super complex or special. It's based on a really simple premise. Find out what really matters to people and make it happen. Why? Because I want our library and all libraries to go viral, to become so deeply embedded in the communities we serve that we are part of every conversation and sit at every table. As Emily Bunyan of Knox County Public Library says, community engagement requires shifting our thinking from the library being the heart of the community to the community being the heart of the library. And so thank you so much for listening to me. I'm very happy to answer any questions that you might have or to hear about if any of this resonated with you.
Thanks so much, Erica. Looks like we do have some time for some questions. The first question is, do you have any tips for how to get more volunteers for your
Oh,
programs?
to so more volunteers to lead programs?
Yeah, I think to help with your programs. Yep.
Okay, to help with the programs. So what we did is we asked people. We started with our patrons because we were able to see what their interests were, and as we engaged them and talked to them, we found out what they were good at. And also, it's a small community, so people really know each other. But we knew, for instance, that one of the retired school teachers was really great at raising chickens. And so we said, hey, oh, and I should put in context, remember we're a rural library, so that's why raising chickens is so exciting. Um, and so we asked her if she would come to a program on raising chickens, and she did, and we couldn't fit everybody in the room, so we had to have a second session. And then it just snowballed. And one thing that happened which was very interesting to me that I didn't anticipate was I asked Patrizia, who ended up being one of our staff members, but in the beginning she was somebody in our knitting group, and she was talking about how her daughter was going off to college and she wasn't sure what she was going to do with herself, and maybe she'd come volunteer at the library and would we have a space for her. And I was like, I'd love to have you at the library. Now, she's from Puglia and is a native Italian speaker. And so I said, but instead of shelving books, would you be willing to teach an Italian class? And she was like, oh, does anyone want to learn Italian? I was like, I think they do. And so we began offering Italian language classes at the library. And it was really amazing for a number of reasons. I mean, when we first started, it was because the library, one of the things I didn't talk about is that, so over the course of the 6 years, our budget more than doubled. So we went from 165 to 340 some thousand dollars, which was great. But in the beginning, when Patrizia started, we were really everything was like we aspired to have a shoestring to use. So she would be writing the lessons on like the back of cardboard and stuff like that and holding it up for people. And by the time she left, she was, we had gotten an Apple TV, so she could create lessons on her iPad and project it to the TV and then upload it to our YouTube channel so people could have it. It was really this amazing evolution to see how somebody really grew into this, which is fantastic. But what we found was after we had been offering Italian, which was very popular, for maybe 3 months, somebody approached me and said, um, she was from China. She said, I speak Mandarin Chinese. Could I teach a Chinese class? And I was like, yes, you may. That would be fantastic. And once that got going, then somebody else said, well, I would really like to teach Latin. But I only want to teach to teens. I was like, that's fine. And it was incredible to me, but that was one of our most popular teen programs, was actually a Latin class. We had like standing room only for it, which was amazing. And then we had people want to teach Korean and everything else. Our experience was that once you got it started, people saw that the programs were being led by their friends and neighbors, and everybody is good at something. It's just a matter of figuring out what it is that they like to do and involving them or getting them involved and asking them to share their talent. And nobody ever said no when we asked. So I think just start asking people to share, and then in no time at all, you will have more programs than you have space for.
Thank you, Erica. Great tips. We have a few questions. Maybe we could go back to the beginning of your presentation when you were talking about the questions that you asked your community. A couple people wondering if you could review where those questions came from. I think it was the Harvard Institute,
Yep.
and look at those questions that you asked.
Yes. So those questions are all, hang on one second, available at So all of this, all of the tools from the Harwood Institute are available at ala.org /LTC. And so this particular exercise, these 4 questions are from the ask exercise. And these are meant to be done they're meant to be done one-on-one, but in reality and practice, it's better to have 2 people go out, one person asking the questions and kind of probing and following up on the question to really get good information, and the second person taking notes. Because if you're trying to ask questions and take notes, it doesn't always work out as well because your time and attention is split. But if one person can really focus on the questioning and the other person takes notes, that'll work out better. Were there
Thank you. And
specific, yeah.
uh, I was just going to say that we'll also make sure that that link is included in the resources that we send out next week. So everyone will have that link, and they'll also have the slides will also be available. So they'll have the link to that.
Great.
Next question is, how did these changes go over with your staff, and how did you inspire them to align with this new vision of community engagement?
Oh, that's a great question. So when we got back from our first training, the first thing we did was we did an aspirations exercise with our staff, with my staff, and then with my board, because I thought it was really important that people knew what was going to be happening. This was also a really big shift, a really big cultural shift, and I'll be honest, not everybody was on board, and some people ended up choosing to leave, which is absolutely okay. But what we did through this was that the very DNA of our organization began to change. And while at first it was particularly confusing for staff who were used to the director kind of sitting at the circulation desk with them all day, and then all of a sudden the director is out of the building, you know, asking people questions and doing all sorts of other things that aren't, I wasn't right there for them. So that was confusing. But there were some people that kind of got it right away and that ran with it. And a lot of my team had just kept these questions. We had them on on 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper, and they would just keep them in their purse or their bag. So if they were out at the grocery store or someplace, they could just ask people as they saw them. We used them everywhere, and it was really great. What happened was that as we were engaged in the community, your staff are going to be your best resources, right? Because they're going to know a lot of people and they're going to know who does what. And so as we started getting people involved with doing the programming and recruiting volunteers, my team members could identify like, oh, you know who does this? Or if you want, I would say like, oh, you know what I'd love to do? I'd love to have a beekeeping program. And they'd be like, oh, call Remco. He'll do the program. And it was just kind of, they help build those connections, and it's all social capital, and just plugging into that.
Great. One more question. In your experience, does doing more off-site programming increase your on-site traffic?
Well, that's a good question, and I don't know. I don't know necessarily that it did, but I'll also say I'm not sure. To me, it didn't matter, because what I wanted to do was to raise the profile of the library and have more people become involved with the library. And overall, more people were definitely involved with the library. We had more people with library cards. Our circulation was increasing. Attendance at programs was increasing. All of that was a good thing. And I think it gave people a chance to interact with us in a place that, because we were meeting them where they were, there wasn't any sort of intimidation or fear about seeing us. Nobody had to worry about, oh, they're going to know that I have fines or whatever else. It was just a very low-key way to meet people. So, but I don't know, because I never looked at those numbers to see if it translated into increased usage at the library itself. But our circulation did increase, so maybe. Sorry, I don't have a
Great.
better answer for that.
Thank you. Um, we have a question. Are you or were you, when you were at Red Hook, were you a department of the city? And if so, how did they support you? If your library board was the governing body, how did they support you?
So we were a municipal library, but it's different. We were pretty much autonomous. So my board, so like I said, we did the aspirations exercise and we talked about, and while we were doing that, I could then say, this is what we're going to be spending the next 6 months doing. We're going to be going out and meeting with, all these different groups to do this work and to do these exercises. And actually, I had them help me identify, and if there were groups that I didn't have an entry into, but they might know somebody, um, who did. I had them help me identify what groups we should go meet with and do introductions to any that I didn't know. So I got them involved right away. Our village, so we are a village in a town, so we have both a village mayor and a town supervisor. And the village was super supportive. The deputy mayor was actually on my team and came with me to get trained for the ALA initiative and even came to an ALA midwinter meeting with me, which was awesome. And he got so into it that he came into my office one time with this big stack of paper. And he's like, have you seen this? Have you seen this? I was like, I don't know what you're holding. And he said it was the first Aspen Institute report that they had released. And he was so happy. He said, we're doing all of this. And it made me feel really great, mostly that my deputy mayor had seen, he must have gotten it the very day it came out because he came to me the next day, but that he was so interested now in what was going on in the library that he was searching for stuff about it and looking at what some of the latest thinking was coming out. So what it did is really changed our relationship with the municipality, and we became um, really seen as a leader in the community and someplace to go. Like when they needed help with different issues, they would come to us and talk to us and ask us to help them out. And it was a really, really great relationship. We were lucky to have wonderfully involved mayor and then the town supervisor as well.
Great, thank you. Another question about relationships. Do you have any suggestions for strengthening the relationship between the public library and the elementary school libraries?
Ah, so what we did is when I first got there, I invited we are lucky enough, well, I was lucky enough in Red Hook to have an elementary school library, a middle school librarian, and a high school librarian. And so I invited them over after we had finished the new children's room to give them like a sneak peek and to have tea and to talk about working together. And that kind of so at least we knew what each other looked like. And the elementary librarian is just terrific, really amazing. And I knew that she was interested in doing stuff. The high school librarian at the time was like on her way out, so she wasn't really interested. But then they got a new high school librarian who was fantastic. So sometimes it's waiting for the right people to come in and align and create those relationships with. But one of the things that I've noticed is that part of the reason why our relationship got really strong with the village was because of the travel and the time that we were spending together, and the same with the school librarians. We took part in a program called I Lead New York in 2015, I guess it was, and I asked the school librarians to partner with me as well as the librarian at Bard College. Um, and Tanya, the librarian at the Red Hook High School, agreed to do it and came with us, and we had a chance to spend a lot of time together. And what we were doing was actually planning this mobile. Initially, it began as a mobile maker space, and then kind of evolved into having books and doing more. Um, but so we really had a lot of time together to plan and to think and to get to know each other outside of our libraries, which was really valuable. So relationship building is something that takes a lot of time, and you really have to be willing to invest that time and that's harder sometimes to explain to your board. My board was very understanding and knew that um, that was the work that had to be done in order to help move the library forward. So they supported it. but it definitely it takes a lot of time. I mean, this all happened over 6 years. It wasn't overnight, you know. So I hope that helps.
Great. I think we'll have time for one more question, then we'll wrap it up. Um, a couple of people were wondering how many staff members you have altogether, and then who on your staff helps promote your events.
Excellent. So when I started, as I said, I was the only full-time person, and I had 6 part-time people, um, and 2 pages. And pages were teens who worked like a couple hours in. By the time I left, um, I was full-time, and I had a full-time assistant and a full-time um, program coordinator, which was great, and we needed it because we were doing like I don't know, like 600 some programs a year, drawing about 10,000 people, which for us was a lot. Um, so that's one of the things that had grown over the years as our budget grew. It was about building our capacity, and I will say that because of the work that we had done in our community, we went from the first time we had a budget referendum. Um, the vote was so close that I had to call down to the Board of Elections to see how many absentee ballots were out because they couldn't call it. It was that close. To by the end, we were having like a 4-to-1 margin. So that was probably one of the biggest changes we saw, that we we had built enough of a relationship in the community where we could feel fairly confident about if we asked for things, and people were incredibly generous. Whatever we asked for, we got. Um, and it was a very different kind of relationship when we were asking for voters or when we were asking for fundraisers or whatever. So part of that is just is to build is to build in. So by the end, I had yeah. So there were 3 of us that were full time, and then I had 11 part time people. So it was a lot of growth. And since I've left, they've passed another budget resolution, and I think now they have 4 full-time people.
Great. Thank you, Erica, so much for sharing your story with us today. Looks like we're out of time, so we're going to wrap it up. I just want to remind everybody that if we didn't get to your question today, you will get emailed the full Q&A next week. And we do hope that everyone was able to take away some newfound knowledge to support their own initiatives today. Recording of the webcast will be available on the Demco Ideas and Inspiration website by next week, and that's ideas.demco.com, so you can review the presentation, you can share it with your colleagues. And next week, like I said, you'll also be receiving an email that will include the slides and a resource list and the full Q&A. You'll also be receiving a survey at the end of the webinar to let us know how we did, so please take a few moments to give us your feedback and thoughts on future webinar topics. And remember, you also have access to over 40 on-demand webinars that you can watch at your convenience at ideas.demco.com/webinars. And I want to thank you again for joining us today. Have a wonderful afternoon.